It's on the use of AI for governance, but I will basically skip the stuff that you know and has been in the news a lot, like e-governance, e-ID, and e-voting. It's pretty boring from my point of view because it's basically reinventing what we already have in a digital way. So the question is, what else can we do and how well are we doing? And when you read the news about public informatics projects or software projects, you often see headlines and pretty concerning ones. Most of those projects don't seem to run very well. So I think governance is far from using any digital means with a few exceptions, but perhaps politics and governance is not as impotent as it may seem. So for example, there's a global center for cybersecurity and collects a lot of data. And I've been asked one day, what else can be done with this data? And it also basically connects to the question, what else can be done with your algorithms, with your machine learning and AI tools? And I do have some concerns that I'd like to share with you. And those concerns have also been raised recently by the boss of the Secret Services in Switzerland. He said, we need to take care of democracy, otherwise it's going to go away. And it should be this way, I think. I'd like to remind everyone that we have the OECD AI principles. And one of those principles is respect for the rule of law, human rights, and democratic values, including fairness and privacy. And Switzerland is part of the OECD, right? It's actually many countries who are part of it. And also, we've had recently a statement of the United Nations, and they basically have spoken up that we should have the same rights online and offline. We should be closing the digital divide, and we should govern this technology rather than let it govern us. Okay, so this is already decided, and it's basically our job to help make it happen. I could now continue with a talk on digital democracy, how to manage societies better than optimal, but I've given that talk several times already, so you can look it up on the internet. You see the link down there. And there's also a collection of works of my professorship and my team on digital democracy, which could potentially inspire you. So I will skip that. And until a couple of years ago, and perhaps even now, many people would think e-government is basically not yet there. We were talking about it all the time, but when is it going to happen? But it doesn't mean that the digitalization would not have had any impact on our societies and that data and machine learning and AI wouldn't be used. For example, for engineering consent. So I will be talking a bit about the less known uses of AI for governance. And in fact, I've also, after producing my slides, I've been asking ChatGPT for it, in the talk I'm going to give in 30 minutes. He was giving kind of 10 times more answers within 30 seconds, but I hope this talk will be a bit more entertaining. Okay, so at least ChatGPT also identified those issues that I will address today. Engineering of consent is not a particularly democratic approach. It should be more listening to people, what they need and want, right? And in fact, this comes from Edward Bernays. Bernays has also written this book about propaganda. It has been extremely influential also during the Third Reich. It was a basis of the mass psychology that the Nazi regime was built on. And now you could think we are not using it anymore because it had very bad impact on the world. After all, there were 80 million people dying in the Second World War. There was a Holocaust. But still, the very same techniques are being used under a different wording. It's called now public relations. In fact, it has become a lot more powerful. Now, what you need to remember is we're living in an attention economy. And this is using the fact that our attention is very selective. And so we can be distracted from certain kind of things. We can also be made pay attention to other things. And this allows basically to influence what we're thinking, how we're feeling, and what we're doing. And this is about social engineering. And most likely the world works differently from what you may think. We are certainly living in a time of big data, huge masses of data being collected, also about us. And this is fueling, of course, the digital age, in particular machine learning and AI. And some people think we'll have super intelligence soon, and perhaps eventually we'll have machines more intelligent than all the people on the planet. You can disagree with this. It's hard to say will it come true or not. But what we can say is that you're all being profiled and targeted, all of you, including myself, of course. And we have learned about that back in 2015. It was one of the revelations of Edward Snowden. And in fact, there are pretty detailed profiles about every one of us that record the character of every one of us, the personality. And in fact, for some time, it was even accessible for everyone. You could look up the personality of your neighbor or your colleague or your friend or enemy. And now we're a little bit more sensitive about it, but this is not everything that has happened. So we have been put on the psycho couch, nobody told us about it, but also we've been turned into what people call lab rats in the digital world. And this reminds us basically of the Skinner box, where animal experiments have been done in order to make them do certain kind of things. Now, of course, we are not held in boxes, but there are filter bubbles. And this is kind of the modern day equivalent of those Skinner boxes. They expose us to selective information, and that selective information can be used basically for influencing us. And in fact, there are millions of experiments that are being done with us every day. It's called A/B testing. So we're being exposed to certain kind of information and also presentation of information, and then it's being measured how we respond to it and how we can be made to do certain kind of things. So basically, this is an illustration of what happens. Our behavior is an output, that is the input for AI. The AI then responds with a certain output that is an input for us. And this cycle is being repeated until it works better and better, and we can be influenced ever more precisely. There's even a movie about it, The Social Dilemma, is reporting about how it works. So we're being manipulated in our choices by personalized information. I could talk a lot more about it, but there's not so much time. But we've learned also firsthand from Tristan Harris how it works. He's been working in a Google control room for some time. He's given this wonderful TED talk where he explains how a handful of tech companies control billions of minds every day, including, of course, yours. And in fact, there was the time where politics was openly speaking about using psycho tricks in order to influence our thinking, feeling, and behaviors. And most people may not know that there are lots of so-called nudge units around the world. When people got a bit nervous about nudging, they were renamed into behavioral insight labs. But there are really dozens of them around the world, basically in every country almost. And this was based on a book called Nudge. And what we have been not informed about for some time was that those nudges would be personalized, and the personalization would be using surveillance data, basically. Okay, now, euphemistically, this is called liberal paternalism. So the state is taking care of us, and companies too. But the question comes up, isn't it more about engineering conformity? And I have a book cover and a brochure that basically suggests that this is actually the case. We learn more about it from another Snowden revelation about GCHQ's JTRIC program, which basically was figuring out how to use all the cognitive biases that we have. Of course, our brain is a wonderful organ that just takes about 40 watts and much more efficient than the supercomputer today. But it's so efficient because it makes shortcuts, and those shortcuts make this brain hackable in a sense, right? So the Secret Service basically has figured out hacks in order to exploit those cognitive biases. Lots of them, as you can see, and didn't stay there. Eventually, we saw that there were attempts to manipulate democratic elections. That was the Cambridge Analytica scandal, but basically this privatized military propaganda platforms, so the military can do it too, and can do it a lot more effectively than, of course, Cambridge Analytica, a private company. What we've also learned over time is that this has happened over many years. In fact, in more than 60 countries, democratic countries around the world, that means for a long time we haven't seen free and anonymous democratic elections. We have been manipulated in our choices, and it shouldn't be this way. Okay, so this is kind of the past. It's still happening, but now we have much better technology. Who of you, by the way, thinks we're living in the information society finally? Please raise your hands. Okay. Yeah, I would have agreed some time ago, but you need an update. Because we are now actually living in society 5.0 or 5.0, and it was announced back in 2017 as our future. And so the question is, what is Society 5.0? And this is basically what results from the fourth industrial revolution, or the second machine age, as some people also say, and is characterized by cyber-physical systems, but not only, as we'll see in a moment. It's very much, of course, you know about cyber-physical systems. It's about automation. It's also being used in smart cities. So it should make our life comfortable. But the question is, how far would we go? And it turns out probably ambitions are bigger than what most of us would expect. Because if you read on Wikipedia about the fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0, then you see that not only artificial intelligence and advanced robotics being mentioned, of course that's what we would expect, but also gene editing, that makes you think. And in fact, what seems to me is that we're on the way to a cybernetic society, finally, The idea is quite old. So the idea is that we could replace governance by information feedbacks. That would basically do the same thing as politicians do, just much better. That's at least what some people think and claim. And there have been attempts to work on this on an operating system for the planet. I mean, not an operating system for your smartphone or computer. We're talking about an operating system for the planet. And you're part of that planet. That means also an operating system for you, as I will argue later on. Okay? Now, how far could that go? One expert has suggested that we could be living in a post-voting society even, and it says in one of the sentences, as we know exactly what people do and want, there is no need to vote. Behavioral-related data can replace democracy as societal feedback system. This is pretty explicit. Of course, it's not an official government statement, but some companies, at least, some institutions are working on this. And so we would have basically two operating systems, our official political system, and then the digital system that acts in the background. And the question is, would it disturb our life or would it support it? Anyway, whatever happens, we are being put under the microscope. You may like it or not. It's not just smart meters, smart homes, smartphones that are contributing to this. The smartphone, you know that, of course, has a lot of sensors in it. And the question is what is happening with those sensors. It's not so explicitly said. If you buy a wearable such as a smartwatch, then of course you do expect health benefits. So you are aware that health data is being collected. Who of you has a smartwatch here in the room? Okay. And yes, I mean, of course, AI is being used in big data for the future of medicine. Among others, there are attempts to build human digital twins. These would be personalized digital twins, I mean, of every one of us, including what we do and what our health situation is. And why is this being done? The promise is that eventually we would have a personalized medicine or precision medicine, that means tailored to your body. So we could have more targeted treatments with less side effects and more effectiveness. And of course, that sounds good. But it seems like we're at the very beginning, and it's not so clear how many of those promises would actually come true. But this is on the way, okay? So I'd like to ask you, whom would you share your intimate health and brain data with? With the Secret Service? Raise your hand. Nobody? Why not? Military? The president of your country or chancellor of your country? Health minister? A big pharma company? Big IT companies? So quite a few people. Your doctor and yourself? Okay, so basically we agree that this data should be in our hands, kind of. Your data in your hands, and you could share it with your doctor if you wish, or with anybody else if you wish, okay? The question is this what is happening? Now, interestingly enough, many data can already be recorded remotely. I'm not sure you're aware of it. For example, Wi-Fi can measure the heart rate, and it does not even need wearables. Who knew that? Okay, nobody. Now, things get a lot more interesting now, and actually for a couple of years. Because now we have converging technologies. And so basically, information technology comes together with biotechnology, nanotechnology, and cognitive sciences. So this is really about our thinking. And the question is, what is going on here? And I will introduce this to you now. We're speaking about the Internet of Bodies. And we've been informed back in 2020 by the World Economic Forum that tracking how our bodies work could change our lives. Okay, most likely every one of us would see the point. It says collecting our physical data via a range of devices that can be implanted, swallowed, or worn. I mean, also what you eat could be part of that, right? So then in 2020 also, they informed us the Internet of Bodies is here. Did you know that? And it also said recent technological advancements have ushered in a new era of the Internet of Bodies with an unprecedented number of connected devices and sensors being affixed or even implanted and ingested into the human body. So it's not just your smartwatch. An unprecedented number of connected devices. The Internet of Bodies is here. Now, this is a popular word, and it actually stands for the Internet of Nanothings or Internet of Bio-Nanothings. And so the idea is basically that nanoparticles have the size of up to 100 nanometers. That's a 10,000th of a millimeter, much smaller than the diameter of a hair, not visible to the eye, fits into a human cell. To put those nanoparticles somehow into our body and use specific nanoparticles to read out data. Those could be dump particles. So you're not talking about implanting microchips into people. This is, I think, disinformation. So these are just stupid nanoparticles as they're in the air, in food, in drinks, and in medical products. And many of them, have no further use apart from perhaps chemical uses, but some of them are more interesting. So here is a summary table of most frequent nanoparticles in Internet of Bodies or converging tech context. And you see here that they're magnetic nanoparticles, among others, and they're also carbon-based nanomaterials. And I show them to you over here, so they look quite beautiful. They're just much smaller than this. And so the question is, what could you do with them? And the data that you can read out using this using physical principles, right? It's scattering, reflection, triggered emission, kind of physics principles that would be used in order to read out data. It's not a computer chip. And so, 2013, the United States decided to come up with the BRAIN Initiative. And interestingly enough, that was made up not only of neuroscientists, but also of experts in nanotechnology. And this is actually the mission. The BRAIN Initiative seeks to deepen understanding of the inner workings of the human mind and to improve how we treat, prevent, and cure disorders of the brain. According to some people, could be also behavioral disorders. Then there is a scientific publication that's more explicit about it. And it says, nanoscience and nanotechnology are poised to provide a rich toolkit of novel methods to explore brain function by enabling simultaneous measurement and manipulation of activity of thousands or even millions of neurons. We and others refer to this goal as the Brain Activity Mapping Project. And then, people were thinking of experiments with mice and rats, but also there is a paper about human brain cloud interface. It's more theoretical paper of what could be done, but people are thinking about it, people are working on it. So the question is, how could it work in more detail? And you have perhaps also heard about electronics or optogenetics. Who knows what optogenetics is? Oh, very few people. You should really know that because it's extremely interesting from a scientific point of view. And you have probably seen also these pictures down there, kind of with brains and rays of light, and have you wondered what this is about? Now, I think it's about optogenetics, actually. So this is from Academy of Science report. And it says optogenetics explores ways to stimulate genetically modified nerve cells using light pulses instead of electricity. Okay, so things are getting interesting now. So then there are also papers about wireless optogenetic neural dust for deep brain stimulation, and there are also experiments in mice and rats about this. There's a paper in Nature about optogenetic control of RNA function. That's also quite interesting. And there is a paper you may want to look at about Internet of Bodies, a systematic survey on propagation, characterization, and channel modeling. So there are many different channels that you can basically access to read out data. Then also there are papers about in vivo sensors that can be read out in real time. First paper 2013, the second one about real-time in vivo monitoring of magnetic nanoparticles in the bloodstream in 2017. 2020, we have this paper by Natsea, an Internet of Bio-Nano Things application for early detection and mitigation of infectious diseases. And 1 year before already, a Battelle-led team wins the DARPA award to develop injectable bidirectional brain-computer interfaces. So, importantly, this is non-invasive, as they call it, neurotechnology, non-invasive brain-computer interfaces. So you don't need surgery to put a computer chip into the brain of a person. This technology basically avoids that. Then there is an interesting brochure that I really recommend you to read about human augmentation. The dawn of a new paradigm dates May 2021 by the UK Ministry of Defence, but also Bundeswehr Office for Defence Planning was a partner of this brochure, and it said it could be argued that treatments involving novel vaccination processes and gene and cell therapies are examples of human augmentation already in the pipeline. It further says that the future of human augmentation should not be decided by ethicists or public opinion. That means by you and me. Right? Have a look. Okay, and then in 2024, we have this paper, Advances in Deep Brain Imaging with Quantum Dots, Structural, Functional, and Disease-Specific Roles. And then quantum dots. Now, what is this? These are basically atomic structures that can emit photons, and those photons can be measured, and some of it can be perhaps even done with smartphones. Okay. Then in 2024, we had this cover of The Economist. You can take it seriously or not, but surely what we see over here, now magnified on the left, which is brains connected to a surveillance apparatus, right? What does it want to tell us? Hard to say, I don't know. But what I want you to think about is, imagine one could try to steer human behavior with generative AI. So rather than feeding generative AI with text or pictures, we would feed basically human behaviors and how it can be triggered, you know? And so how many parameters do you think would be needed to control human behavior? 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, 10 million? Not that much, most likely. And how many would you need to control an entire society? Could one build such a machine? Would anybody have this idea and do it? You know, what would be the implications of that? And are there any problems, perhaps? Now, who has heard about neurocapitalism already? Also, nobody. One person. Okay. So, neurocapitalism is basically what comes, according to some people, after surveillance capitalism. Surveillance capitalism was already able to figure out, more or less, precisely what you think, feel, and do. Neurocapitalism wants to go a step further and determine what you think, feel, and do. Okay? It would also basically turn your brain into an asset, but an asset that would be managed by companies. All right. It could be also the basis even of a political system. And there are very few papers about this, also a book, but this is certainly something that we need to think about because the technology becomes increasingly available to implement such a system, and the implications would be severe. It would not be a democratic system. So I'm asking, why not democracy? You know, if we want to have this kind of technology and use it, how should we use it? You know, please think about it. And already advertisers are trying to hijack our dreams, scientists say. This is people at the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So we should probably take that seriously. So there is a paper also pointing out dangers of neurocapitalism. Nobody would be surprised, I guess, but they argue that because of the power inherent to the technology and its potentially ruinous abuses, action must be taken before the appearance of the technology and not come as a reaction to it. Now, already back in 2019, we find an article, Brain Reading Tech is Coming, the law is not ready to protect us. And I'm not sure it's ready to protect us now. I should tell you that this is a serious issue that the UNESCO has broadly discussed. There are documents about it. It has also been going to the United Nations. But you know, some countries have withdrawn from the UNESCO. So some people don't feel bound by the recommendations of the UNESCO. Now, another serious implication is that this technology can also be used for cognitive and hybrid war. So we are living in a time of information warfare. I think you have noticed that. It's a battle for our mind. Our mind has become a battleground. And in fact, you can also read about it, official documents like from the Dutch military. Here they describe behavioral change, could be your behavior, is the core of warfighting. And there are books on military neuroscience and the coming age of neural warfare and on mind wars. And there's also a paper that has been published in the NATO proceedings, and it's about human body digitization, Internet of Bodies, and a new dimension of military operations, and says down there, instead of devices connected to the internet as in the Internet of Things, human bodies can be connected to a network with the potential to be controlled and monitored remotely. It continues, it's not yet there, that was 2019, but the future is not so far away. So that was 6 years ago. Okay. So there are also some scientific concerns. And there's a dark secret at the heart of AI, and you all know it. It's kind of the broad use of black box algorithms. Of course, you don't always do it, but many people do it. It has been very powerful, very successful in many applications. I don't deny that. But also the question is, what are the limitations? Are there any systems for which this approach doesn't work so well? I'm thinking in particular of complex network dynamical systems, which have perhaps delayed reactions and perhaps probabilistic reactions, which are extremely hard to learn. And however, the world is full of these kind of systems, ecosystems, our brain, our health, all of that would be these kind of systems. So you know that the end of theory and in the sense of science has been announced, but then a couple of years later, the now Nobel Prize winner, Geoffrey Hinton, also called the godfather of AI, left Google and warned of dangers ahead. How serious do we need to take those warnings? Now, I'm not talking about AI apocalypse here. I'm not talking about robot wars or autonomous weapons. All of those are concerns one could have, but that could be in the future. It may never happen, but what happens already is hallucinations, right? So it's hard to distinguish what is good advice and what is a bad advice. And also, the power of the black box algorithms is limited. Let's take a very simple example in my area of research, which is fitting trajectories of pedestrians. I mean, how people walk. And you can make video recordings, you can extract the trajectories and then use machine learning to learn those trajectories. And it turns out machine learning does a lot better in predicting the further course of those trajectories than model-based approaches to describe pedestrian behavior. I acknowledge that. But it also turns out that machine learning-based models fail largely to learn avoiding collisions. But that is the thing that really matters, So it learns the trajectories, but it did not get that it's about avoiding collisions, really. And so we may ask, are some of the terrible accidents we've seen among autonomous vehicles, are they because of weaknesses and limitations of black box algorithms? We should be asking this question. Also, there are other examples that may worry you. So some people think that Facebook has built vision of democracy on bad mass. Not sure you agree or not. Of course, that's debatable. And also debatable is whether that has really been a cause of the pogroms that we've seen against the Rohingyas. So people have died. The question is, what role did Facebook have in that? What we can say for sure is that digital means are being used for repression, and also democracies around the world are not currently doing very well. They seem to be in retreat to some extent, and this is certainly enabled by certain kind of uses of big data and AI. So there are certainly also ethical issues. And so what are those? Which red lines are being crossed? Privacy, certainly, self-determination, personal identity may be influenced, perhaps even changed. Militarization, Nuremberg Code may be violated. Human dignity is at risk. Then there are certain things that are qualitative in nature, and so are hard to quantify, and therefore a data-driven and AI-controlled society may miss out on those important qualitative issues, qualities of life, love, freedom, creativity, consciousness, human dignity. What is human dignity about? Many people have difficulties defining it. Here is a sentence of the Bundesverfassungsgericht Supreme Court in Germany, and they said it would not be compatible with human dignity if the state could claim the right to forcibly register and catalog people in their entire personality. The state also has to defend our human dignity against third parties, like companies and also other countries. So the essence is humans are special. They should not be treated like animals. They should not be treated like things, not like robots, and not like data. Okay? Anyway, despite all of this, we've been turned into data mines. It's possible to collect a lot more data about you than you might think. Let me summarize a few learnings of today. So there's large-scale manipulation in the attention economy by means of personalized information. This is happening. It's hard to notice. It's often subliminal. Wi-Fi, 5G are not only communication networks, can also be used as measurement networks. Nanoparticles are special kinds of wearables. Some can be used to read out body data. This makes us vulnerable potentially. And human augmentation can be used in a military way. There are obviously many dual uses of that technology, particularly if people are not aware of this technology. And I would like to point out their unwanted side effects, for example, on health and mental health as well. So I do think we need to get back control over our own lives and therefore over our digital twins, because the digital twins are being used to figure out how to manipulate us most effectively. So as long as we are not in control of our digital twins, then other people can try to control our lives to some extent at least. And therefore we need solutions for informational self-determination. As we decided in the beginning, our personal and health data should be in our hands. This is not the case right now. This needs to be changed. Otherwise, I think I would be quite pessimistic about the future of democracies and human rights and human dignity. And if you want to learn more about what I said today, then there is a preprint about it. You can find it over there. This beautiful picture has been created by Javier, by the way. I want you to be a game changer. You can still change things to some extent. The AI Center, you are quite powerful. You can steer into a different direction. And I'm not opposed to using big data. I'm not opposed to digital technology, not opposed to AI. Just the question is how to use it. Well, how to use it in a way that respects human dignity and our human rights and democracy. I mean, our possibility to determine or co-determine our future. And there is another way to combine cybernetics and synergy than the control room approach, that is also known as cybersyn approach. That alternative approach is synergetics, and it's based on bottom-up self-organization. So it's really about digitally assisting coordination, cooperation, and self-organization, but not forcing any part of the system to do a certain thing. And this can basically do many wonderful things. I'd like also you to work on building digital democracy and to think about how to build democracy by design. So when you create software, there are many design decisions. Make sure that you take the more democratic one that empowers people to have an impact on our future. And I want you to contribute to supporting the wisdom of crowds, which is a decentralized collective effect that comes about under favorable conditions that can be supported also by suitable platforms. Obviously, many social media platforms today are not of this kind. And I'd like to point out that information distortion is a problem. We have today many bubbles, hypes, fake news, myths, disinformation, deception this is disturbing, disrupting our perception of reality and the problems that we face and should be solving. So we make wrong decisions, we make wrong investments, and I think we should have as clear as a picture as possible of the world and its problems so we can better address what really matters. And there are further things you can do. You can use a value-sensitive design approach. You can invent tech that protects human rights. You can build freedom tech. And we should also be going away really from this approach of social engineering, like the benevolent dictator approach, as some people call it, towards assisted self-organization, symbiotic co-evolution, and boosting serendipity. And what is that? This is about creating lucky coincidences, opportunities for people and their interactions to basically support a better future to materialize. You can do all this. And now we're heading towards lunch. Nun geht's ans Eingemachte. There's a translation into English, which is now we're getting serious. So now my final question to you is, how many manufactured nanoparticles do you think you will eat today? 1, and 10, 1,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000. Well, it's between 10 to the power of 10 and 10 to the power of 13, perhaps even more.